Alright, howdy folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today we have some very early access gameplay of the new World War II FPS Resolve to show to you. And when I say early access, I genuinely mean very early access, so please keep that in mind as you watch the gameplay. Now, if you want to know more about the game, I'll have their Steam store page linked in the description below the video. This was just one of many test events the developers are planning to host, and you can find their Discord link on the Steam store page where you can sign up to be a part of these future tests yourself. Now, my squad was stacked with a bunch of content creators, and playing alongside them made the playtest, which was very rough around the edges to say the least, a lot more enjoyable. So Resolve is a first-person shooter set during World War II, with a focus on large-scale maps and combined arms warfare. Where it tries to set itself apart from other games in the genre is its dynamic weather system, as well as a day and night cycle. And another interesting feature that really sets this game apart from other games is its loadout point or equipment point system. If I understand it correctly, the way this will work will basically change the way people will act each of their in-game lives. I don't think I have to explain the dynamic weather system too much. Some of the examples shown include a normal sunny day, or fog or rain that may or may not occur during a session. Now, rain might obscure the sound of your squad running around the objective, while fog will obviously hide your character at a distance from enemy eyes. A little less obvious is the day and night cycle, besides the fact that, of course, it's harder to spot enemies in the dark, but this also comes with the sun rising in the morning, blinding enemies who are trying to spot you if you have the sun in your back. Personally, I really like the idea that these battles seemingly go on for hours or days on end, and the changing day and night cycle adds an idea of the passage of time as you and your team struggle with the enemy. There's also a flare system to help aid spotting at night, which is very welcome as the night gameplay in our session was absolutely pitch black. But luckily, equipping flare pistols only costs one equipment point. Talking about these equipment or loadout points, and this is where I think Resolve will really set itself apart from similar S games such as Postscriptum or Hell Let Loose. This is just from what I understood from the playtest, and it will most likely not be the final iteration of the system, as one of the developers on their Discord Q&A page said, quote, "It will likely become more complicated as a system down the line," end quote. The system in a playtest worked along the lines of giving you 1 point per minute. Upon death, these points would however not be removed. After a few minutes, this means that you've accumulated say 4 or 5 points, and now you can decide to spawn in with a Sten or Thompson submachine gun if you're playing as the British. A flare gun to spot at night, like I said, costs 1 equipment point as well. Say you spend 4 points on a Sten gun and you die right after spawn, those 4 points are lost, and so is your Sten gun, and you have to wait a few minutes to get enough points to get another run with the Sten gun. Though this, again, current system is allegedly not the final one, it's easy to see how people will have to be more careful when they finally buy an upgrade to their weapon after a few minutes. Whereas in Hell Let Loose or Postscriptum or even Red Orchestra 2, you get to keep your SMG or semi-auto rifle or whatever you have, whatever happens to you in your life. In Resolve, buying an upgrade and then dying right away will not only hurt you, but potentially your team in the long run. It's possible that one of the changes will impact how you gain points, for example via killing enemies or capturing objectives or defending objectives, instead of just getting them passively over time, or that if you die, all your points are lost. Besides upgrading to say a submachine gun or semi-auto rifle from your bolt-action rifle, I can easily think of quite a few other upgrades such as a bayonet or a rifle-mounted grenade launcher. Whatever the developers decide to add here, it's clear that when you spend your points, you are going to want to make the most of that life, as you won't have access to that same kit for a decent amount of time. This also opens up a completely different avenue of approach where, say, a squad leader can ask his squad to save up their equipment points until they can, for example, all afford to buy an MP40. Now imagine this 5 or 6 man squad fully loaded with SMGs charging an objective, giving that squad a lot of close quarter firepower for just 1 life. This opens up a lot of tactical options for gameplay and will make rounds feel different from previous rounds based on when you and your squad, as well as enemy squads, decide to upgrade their kit, and also what they decide to upgrade their kits with. Other than rounds differing in how and when individual players or whole squads decide to upgrade their equipment, maps are also randomly configured each game to create variety in the placement of objectives. Something I really liked reading on the store page is that the game's map and playable area will scale to the number of players in the server, meaning that if you have less players, the map will be smaller and allowing you still a decent experience even with lower player numbers. For example, when the servers are filling up. Currently, the test we had access to personal firearms, some field guns and artillery, amongst which I saw a mortar, a Flak 88, and a Nebelwerfer, just to name a few. However, the intention is for there to be vehicles such as tanks and lighter, perhaps transport vehicles. At one point near the end, our squad leader Nano managed to airdrop into battle, though I'm not sure how exactly he managed to do that, and sadly the server was shut down before we all got to experience that. Airdropping is mentioned on their store page as a feature, allowing for, quote, tactical airborne attacks behind enemy lines, end quote. A feature I did not see, but is mentioned on their store page, is something I'm super interested in, is the responsive hover system, as they call it, which will allow you to peek over obstacles while staying mostly protected. Now, about my own experience with the test itself didn't run very well, to the point where myself and a few others ended up being a little bit nauseous, mostly due to the very low frames. The gunplay feels very wonky and not really satisfying, and I really thought it was more luck than skill to try to hit an enemy with a bolt-action rifle anywhere at a larger distance. Of course, being an early look at the game, or a very early preview build as the developers call it, so I assume this is not what the finished game or even early access game will end up playing like. The devs have said that they aim to have the game cost about $30, though a soon-to-launch Kickstarter campaign will allow for different options to support the developers during the creation of the game and potentially get the game a bit cheaper that way. As of right now, the game in its current state cannot compete with Postscriptum or Hit It Loose, but that's to be expected of a game in such an early stage of development. I'm actually somewhat impressed by what the devs have shown off so far, mostly visually, and I think with a lot of polishing, this could stand out for similar games, if only due to that equipment point system, forgetting even the weather and day-night cycle. People throwing themselves willy-nilly into objectives over and over and over, without regard for themselves like we see in other games, might finally be somewhat dealt with in Resolve due to the equipment point system. Though we will have to see how the game's early access and Kickstarter are of course received by the general public. I really want to commend the game's developers for giving us content creators and the general public at large a very early look at what they are creating, opening themselves up to a lot of criticism, but I believe that's how they'll eventually end up making a better game than without all that input from the community. Now, what do you think about Resolve from this video so far and what you've seen? Let me know down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this quick look at Resolve, and I'll catch you in the next one.